Repeat caller Setuf calling in from España with a question that I don't know how to answer. The question is, what are your thoughts on the horny violinist analogy? And I've never heard it, so I don't know what my thoughts are.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. So
Sure.
yeah, it's a relatively new analogy. I actually came up with it with a friend today. Shout out to Kenneth.
Kenneth, you haven't heard about?
I feel less bad about not hearing about it before.
You haven't heard about it? It was came up with today.
I'm out of the loop
in private.
Okay, cool. Yeah, let's hear it.
I did already mention it on Truth Wanted, so we just modified it and made it the Horny Violinist, but it was already modified on Truth Wanted on Friday. But in any case, if you're interested, I would like to run it by you and hear what you think about it.
Sure. Can I say one thing, and maybe it might go between you and Kenneth. I'll say one thing is that I don't care about analogies really when it comes to this, because especially if we're going to just get to abortion, my answer is pretty simple. You're not going to trump the right of a person's own autonomy. I mean, that's just a simple principle. Whatever analogy that's drawn, I'm just going to go, yeah, that person didn't have the right to use the other person's body. But so I just wanted to point that out, that analogies don't seem to be successful in that way. And also, it's not the actual scenario which we're talking about. But anyway,
but we don't know where this is going. We don't know where this is going.
I'm just pointing out that you guys might take this, and I probably will just listen.
Okay, well, we'll see. I hope we don't lose Jmike. So, okay, what is the horny violinist analogy?
Okay, so I just want to hear your thoughts. So I'm just going to go ahead and describe the scenario. So let's say there is a horny violinist who wants to have sex with me. And in this hypothetical, I have a condition which could make the next person I meet after having sex with a violinist actually physically depend on my body, right? So let's say we do have consensual sex, and after that, it happens that a third party becomes connected to me in such a way that disconnecting them will most likely result in their death. So now for this scenario, I've got two questions for you guys. The first one being, would you say I violated the bodily autonomy of the third party? And the second one would be, do you think it's immoral for me to disconnect the third party without their consent?
Did you violate the bodily autonomy of the third party?
I'm wondering what, because it's an analogy, presumably there's supposed to be a property at which is actually analogous. I'm not seeing that, because the scenario you draw is not the scenario of abortion, if that's what you're trying to get to.
That's a great point right out of the gate.
It's just a false, right? Like, do me better. Identify the property at which is analogous from the actual abortion scenario to the one that you're applying, because I'm not seeing that identified property in the analogy.
Okay, I mean, we can get to that. I'm just curious about the analogy as it stands right now, or the hypothetical, what your thoughts are. I mean, we can analyze where it's not analogous to pregnancy. I'm cool with that.
Yeah, but the screen, I think even says, or maybe it doesn't.
It just says, what are your thoughts on the horny violinist analogy?
I guess I'm just used to talking to Setuf on abortion.
Let's figure out. So what is this analogous to?
Well, the same as the original violence analogy.
No, but what Kenneth is asking is, it's an analogy.
Right.
If the analogy is successful, it's in virtue of whatever scenario it's supposed to be in accordance with. What is that?
Yeah. What is it?
If not abortion, what is it?
Yeah, it's pregnancy, consensual sex, and the question about the morality of the abortion.
Awesome. And so
yeah.
And so in that scenario, you're telling me that the fetus has the same properties the third person? That's not a fetus?
In my hypothetical, no. But
so then it's not. So then it's not analogous.
Yeah, then it's not an analogous. So yeah, and I was wondering if you were doing this, and I was hoping you weren't. The whole thing, because in conversations we've had about this in the past, you've used the term being, and there's a lot of baggage that gets smuggled in under this word of being. So you in this attempted analogy, you're using the word person. So
Yes.
right. So you
Yeah.
would need to establish that a developing fetus has the same properties of personhood.
Yeah. If we literally listed out the properties left and right, there would be traits that we would establish that aren't the same. Thus, they are not the same thing. Thus, you can't use it as an analogous property in your example.
Okay, then why are we using the violinist analogy for to justify?
I don't use analogies. This is why I said before you said anything. This is why I wanted to say before anyone said anything, because I didn't want to be accused of somebody that relies on violinist analogy or things. I don't care about analogies. I care about the actual scenario which we're talking about, because when it comes down to analogies, it's only analogous in virtue of properties you identify. Right. The problem is that if I list these properties out, we're gonna run into an error where it's not actually the properties listed, so it wouldn't be analogous. Which is why I don't like to use I'll use analogies for pragmatic reasons, but we're talking about something like this. I'd rather focus on the scenario, right? Demonstrate why a woman should not have a right to her autonomy. It's just simple. Just give me the argument for that. Because you're saying there's a situation where she loses that right. So please illuminate for me and the audience where that. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just asking you your thoughts on this violinist analogy, because there is a violinist analogy which is used to justify or to show that bodily autonomy does trump the right to somebody else.
I get that. I don't run that analogy, so I don't know why you're trying to straw man the position as if I would accept the analogy in the first place. I could not, but I don't know why you're just trying to bake that in there to fit what you want it to do.
No,
we've established that this analogy doesn't really work for what you're trying to use it for. So there's a better conversation that can be had.
If I understood you correctly, you said the main difference for you is that the third party is a being and a fetus is not, right?
Well, if you're going to make some sort of positive claim that a developing fetus should be classified as a being or as a person, and that therefore it's analogous to this hypothetical that you're proposing, you're going to need to demonstrate that there's something to that.
Okay, would you agree that some people do believe that a fetus is a being at some point in the pregnancy?
I don't give a fuck what some people believe.
Propositional attitudes or attitudes,
it's irrelevant.
They're entirely irrelevant, because what is actually relevant is not the attitudes a person has towards like what the meaning of some utterance is, right? Because it's just a grunt. What matters is when we actually list out, okay, we have some grunt that stands for a person and some grunt that stands for a fetus. When we list out the properties of what makes that thing, right, that gives it its being or whatever, or essence or whatever you want to use, we're going to run into an issue where they're not analogous. So you can't use them interchangeably in an analogy.
Right.
It doesn't have to do with even if you use the word. The difference is that you think it's being and not being. I'm not going to use a word. I'm just going to say when we list out these properties, the fetus and the human are not the same thing. So you can't use a human in your analogy that way, which is why I don't use analogies for abortion. And I think ones that even are used for pro-choice are ill-formed. So we don't need to go back to why one version is successful, because I might not hold to that.
Okay, Jmike, then let me not strawman you and really steelman your position. When does a fetus become a person in your worldview?
Yeah, when it's not.
Well, you're not. Jmike's not the one making the argument that a fetus should be thought of as a person. That's your.
Yeah, it's also a pretty clear distinction between something that depends upon physical autonomy and something that does not. It's a true dichotomy. So I'll let you fill in how that works.
So things like brain activity and feeling pain.
Nothing. This has nothing to do with pain or any of that. This has to do with when something is autonomous and when something is not autonomous. When something is relying on the autonomy of another agent. When something is not relying on the autonomy of another agent.
Okay.
So I said nothing about pain. You're trying to steel man me and you keep straw manning me. I mean, I don't really know what we can do because the analogy's already been, in my opinion, destroyed. I mean, I've already established that one thing is a property of depending upon a human, right from the offset. It's formed in that matter, and then the other is not. And then the other is some weird scenario that's not even actually like tangible to the reality we experience. Like the scenario you even bring up isn't something that even happens. So I don't know what motivational force it's supposed to have. I think I don't know if we lost Setuf, but
It's showing that Setuf's still on the line. The thing I just always wonder is what's with the fixation on abortion? You know, I mean,
yeah, I'm glad you asked. I can explain that to you. So I've been a long time listener and viewer of the ACA, and I've heard in numerous occasions abortion being justified with the violinist analogy, and I believe it's very flawed. This analogy is taking many things not into account, and I believe we should base our beliefs on good arguments and not on flawed arguments.
Setuf, do you think it's flawed for you to call in the show and in virtue of just seeing other ACA members or volunteers, whether they agree to an argument or not, think that means that the other hosts should also agree to that? That seems flawed. Because you did that, and I just demonstrated that I don't follow analogies like that.
I don't know what the violinist analogy is in the first
place. That is fine.
So. Yeah, I may have heard it in the past, but I have no idea what the violinist analogy is.
Okay, I mean, I just wanted to hear your thoughts on the analogy, but if it's too difficult to answer, that's also no problem.
No, I think it's too difficult for you to understand.
No, it's not an issue of too difficult because it's been answered. The issue is that it is not analogous. You would have to demonstrate that the argument.
That.
Okay, then why are you saying that, you know, if we don't want to deal with the analogy because it's too difficult?
It's more simple than that, because if you actually had an analogous argument, it would, for the same reasons why I take the position on abortion, I would have no issues accepting on what is an analogous situation, because I would see, oh, okay, there's a scenario here that's analogous to say that one person's bodily autonomy is going to be violated. Yeah, I'm not going to go with that. But the problem is you didn't establish that in virtue of a property that defines properties that define a fetus versus properties
let's say
that define some human, right? You specifically used a human in your example.
Yeah. That's fine. Let's say this third party did not exist and was forced into existence through this act. How is that different?
How is what forced into what act?
I mean, in my analogy or hypothetical, let's say we did not have this third party as some random person, but it was actually somebody who did not exist before and was forced to now into existence.
So you want to
let's just make it a pregnancy. Let's just make it a pregnancy. Yeah. Let's just talk about it. Okay.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
If two people have consensual sex and that might lead to somebody potentially getting pregnant, is it wrong for them to terminate that pregnancy if they want to? I mean, is that what we're asking? Let's just get to it.
Yeah, if one considers this fetus a being and a person, that's the question, yes.
Well, I don't know what the beingness or the personhood even has to do with it. I think Jmike and I are in agreement that the question is one of bodily autonomy. If the person who is pregnant doesn't want to be pregnant anymore, then they should have every right to get rid of that pregnancy, to terminate that pregnancy. We're talking about ending a pregnancy. Okay, so is it morally right to allow people to end pregnancies that they don't want to carry to term? Yes. If morality is based on the well-being of conscious creatures, then yes, it is morally right to allow people to end pregnancies. I'm sorry?
The fetus at some point conscious, though? Is the fetus at some point during the pregnancy, does it become conscious?
That's irrelevant to
What does that have to
what
do
I
with
was
anything
saying.
that I
Yeah.
just said?
You said it's about conscious creatures and their well-being. So I'm just asking you, are you
Yes.
taking the fetus's well-being into consideration?
Absolutely, yes.
So
Okay.
too, if he's you can take something into consideration and still apply a principle that if that thing has regardless if it has consciousness or not, it doesn't have the right over to live at the expense of another person, right? Another conscious
Bingo.
creature, right? So I don't know where your hang up is on his position or even my position. If I was to say consciousness doesn't matter in my formulation at all, it's just the bare bones autonomy of the person that right that has their own autonomy, right? So and which side you go, I don't know where you're spotting a hang up or an issue.
Is it a moral good to allow people to have autonomy over their bodies? Yeah.
Yes, not unlimited though, which you have agreed, I think, with me, Kenneth, on a previous call. But
yeah, I would agree. But it goes back to this whole thing of like, a person's right to swing their fists ends where my face begins. Absolutely.
Exactly. Yeah.
But
exactly.
these are not analogous situations. Someone swinging their fist around and hitting me in the face is not the same as an individual terminating a pregnancy for obvious reasons. I'm not even going to insult your intelligence by getting into why that is, because it's, come on.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. They're not entirely the same. But anyway, I really just wanted to hear your opinion on this analogy, even if it's not analogous. I thought it's an interesting thought experiment. But still, thank you for the respectful conversation at the end of the day.
Yeah, sure. Cheers.
Sure. Yeah. And honestly, at some point, when you call in, it has you listed as a theist. I would love to hear you get away from the abortion stuff sometime and talk about what you believe and why with respect to a God belief, because that's kind of what this whole show is about.
I talk about fetus rights and also animal rights, if you are open to talk about animal rights and the morality of paying for animals to be slaughtered for our taste.
Are you a theist? Do you believe in a God or gods?
Yes, I am a theist. Well, according to your definition, I call myself a believer. So I am not religious, but yeah.
What's the distinction?
Also talk about this in a previous call.
You believe in the proposition God exists, right? That's what you mean by believer.
Yeah.
Cool. So you're a theist. Okay. Yeah.
I wouldn't say I'm convinced, but yeah, I believe it.
Wait, you say I just got to dig in on this for 1 second, and we'll move on in a second. But okay, so it sounded to me like you just said you're not convinced, but you believe it. Is that what you just said?
Yeah, that's exactly what I just said. Yes.
What is your definition of belief?
Suspect to be true.
Suspect to be true?
You don't think that when you believe a proposition to be true, you're applying some sort of conviction?
Yeah, I would say it's the mental state of being convinced that a claim is true.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm really convinced. I would say I have a suspicion or an intuition that it might be so. So that's why I just say I'm a believer.
An intuition that it might be so. Well, is that based on anything? Is there any sort of what's the rationale there?
I mean, we did discuss this some weeks ago. I'm sure you forgot it. It's basically, I think you call it the argument from incredulity or something like this. My English is not the best, but basically, I cannot explain consciousness and thus have a suspicion based on no evidence.
Gotcha. Well, okay. Well, that would be a very interesting call to dig into sometime. I'm kind of getting the sense that you're not trying to have that call right now. So we're gonna move on. But thank you for calling in. We got a couple more callers to get through. Have a great week.
Guys.
Yep.
You too.
All right.
Bye-bye. Thank you.